Progress.
Um, so they made this covenant. Saul, Jonathan hears exactly what Saul has planned, and so he warns David. David runs off to Ramah to see Samuel. Samuel sends him to Nob, where Nob is a place where the priests have set up an altar, a high place, in order to make sacrifices and things. When he gets there, the priest Ahimelech, it's kind of curious why he's there. David righteously lies to him. I don't know how that works, but and so the priest ends up giving him some of the old showbread that's there in order to sustain him. But David also asked for a weapon. Well, the only weapon that's there happens to be the sword of Goliath. So David takes that sword and he runs off to Gath, which is his Israel's mortal enemies. While he's there, he realizes that they're going to kill him or do something bad to him. So he acts like a madman in order to get him to think he's someone else. They let him go, presumably keeping the sword of Goliath, and he runs off. And that's where we're at today. He gets run off away from Gath and has gone off into the hills of So I'm going to share our screen here for those who may happen to be online that we don't know about. I don't think so. Pop this up here so we can see the whole thing. You did with homework. I did. I forgot what you did.
I'll be there.
All right. So this looks nice, and I've got a screen with no the other stuff on. So where's my
But on that one, there's an inset on one side that maybe.
well, there's my, oh, there we go. I don't know where my mouse went. Okay. So we're in First Samuel chapter 22, verse 1. David left there and escaped to the cave of Adullam, when his brothers and all his father's house heard it. They went down to meet him, or there to him. Everyone who was in distress and everyone who was in debt and everyone who was discontented gathered to him. He became captain over them. Those who were with him numbered about 400. As he runs through this cave of Adullam, and there he sets up kind of a retreat for himself. But everyone who hears about it, probably from his family, they start to gather. So it says those who were in distress, those who were in debt, those who were discontented. We are presuming that is against Saul. They were in distress because Saul was in a position of power. They were in debt to Saul. They were discontented with his leadership, and so they gathered to there, and they presumably, not presumably, he became captain of them. He kind of becomes their makeshift leader. And there's about 400. Adullam means hiding. So that's kind of an appropriate name that we're going to do. And here his family comes first. They're the first ones to come to him. Distress means fear. Debt means foreclosure. Discontent means furiousness. That is all everything out to be and that and so. So we're going to read a couple of psalms that have to do with this particular time frame in David's mind. If y'all want to go to Psalm 57, and someone will read that one. Psalm 57.
Have mercy on me, O God, have mercy on me. For in you my soul takes refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of the living fatigue and fast and past. I cry out to God most high, to God who fulfills his purpose for me. Receive from heaven and save me. Rebuking those who highly pursue me. God sends his love and his faith. I am in the midst of lions. I ride my ravenous feet. Then he speaks of spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens, that the glory be over all the earth. Their spreading up for my feet, I have bowed down in distress with other kids, my past, that was falling to the field. My heart is steadfast, O God, my heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music, with my soul, with my life. I will God. I will listen to God. I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations. I will thank you on the feet. For great is your love, you can see the heavens, your faithfulness reaches to the sky. Please go to the God above the heavens, let me yours be all the earth.
Okay, and now so that's kind of a nice psalm, as he exhorts God to be with him. And, it begins with this idea of fear, and it ends with this idea of praise. And so we'll go on to Psalm 142.
I like that, the other pit and they have fallen in.
Right. Right.
What number, I'm sorry?
Psalm 142. You never want to read that.
With my voice I cry to the Lord. With my voice I make supplications to him. I will pour out my complaint before him. I will tell my trouble before him. And my spirit is faint and on my way. In the path where I walk, they have been with trap for me. Look on my right hand and see. There's no one who takes notice of me. No refuge remains to me. No one cares for me. I cry to you, O Lord. I say, you are my refuge, my fortress in the land of your living. Give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Save me from my persecutors, for they are too strong for me. Bring me out of prison, so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will be bountiful with me.
Okay. So again, most of it is this idea of fear, but at the very end, there's an idea of hope. And these are attributed to David while he was in this state. Maybe while he was waiting for everybody to come to him. Who knows? But we don't know for certain. We kind of attribute it to David because what the traditions are. Until we get a chance to ask David himself. Yes, we'll never really know. So.
Well, there are a lot of songs that are prayers for deliverance. Are they all referring to this period, or do you think some of them?
Oh, no, they're a different time. And some of them have title headings, like these do, that I took.
Yeah.
So up here, I've got a little map of kind of give you an idea of where David, the travels and things. I don't know if he's my mouth there, but he was here in Gibeah of Saul. That's where that dinner was supposed to happen. He ran up to Ramah, Samuel told him to the top. So he runs to the top. This is where Nob is done. Jebus is Jerusalem, just the current name for it on the map. So from Nob, he goes to Gath, way over here. And then from there, that's in the territory. That old Orwellian idea of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So he's run off to the enemy of Saul. So he goes to Gath, and then he has to flee them, so he runs to the beach. This is where it is. This map will pop up here in a little bit toward the end of our lesson today, because Saul is going to follow her. So anyway. So I got a little video to watch here. Hopefully this will start up here pretty quick. It did yesterday. It started on its own yesterday. So we'll see. Maybe not. Well, that's like it's going to. There we go. No. Going back to my main screen. Stop. Okay. Huh. Sorry. That's all right. That's all right. Yeah. Right. Go back to that, now to that. like it's stuck.
Second Chronicles 12.
I'm gonna stop share real quick. Well, no, we're gonna watch a little video. So I'm gonna stop the share real quick and,
Finding.
well, we're on. What is going on? Nothing. It's, I'm so confused. I know. Tell you, this is frustrating.
We'll give us more than two corrupted.
As long as we have a brief station break, will somebody please go out and take a picture of Jeanette's glove book today? It is.
I know.
Oh,
Yes,
here.
let's do that very thing. I couldn't get the data. I didn't get the photo.
I'm without a phone this morning, I was,
Why did you leave the video? Did you like to do a move my phone while
I'll be back.
So let's see if this thing will kick on.
I'm sure you'll still be there.
Keep your finger on that so it doesn't go off.
It's back on now.
It's back on.
He ain't watching.
The books of First and Second Chronicles, while they're two separate books in our Bibles, that division is not original. Due to scroll length, the book was divided in two, but it was written as one book with one coherent storyline. Now, in our English Bibles, Chronicles comes after the books of Samuel and Kings, and most of Chronicles is actually repeat content from those books. And so most modern readers, when they come to Chronicles, they think, wait a minute, I just read all of this, and so they skip it. And that's a shame, because this book is really unique and important in the Bible. In the traditional Jewish ordering of the Bible, Chronicles is actually the last book, because it summarizes all of the Jewish scripture. The first word in the book is Adam, the first character at the beginning of the story, and then the last paragraph announces the return of Israel from exile. Now, we don't know who wrote this book, but we can tell from details within it, it was produced by somebody who lived a couple hundred years after the Israelites returned from the Babylonian exile. Now, for this author, Jerusalem and the temple were rebuilt some time ago, and as we learned from Ezra and Nehemiah, things were not going well. The great prophetic hope was that the city and the temple would be rebuilt, that God would come to live among his people, the Messianic king would come, and all the nations would come live under his peaceful rule, and none of that has happened. And so the author of Chronicles has reshaped these stories of David and Solomon and the kings of the past in order to provide a message of hope for the future. And we'll see that he's designed this book to emphasize two clear themes. First, the hope of the coming Messianic king, and second, the hope for a new temple. Let's just dive in and you'll see these themes all over the book. First Chronicles begins with 9 chapters of genealogies, long lists of names. And you'll read these and think that this is kind of boring, and that may be true for you, but actually they're very, very important. The author is summarizing here the whole storyline of the Old Testament by naming all of the key characters in the stories. And as he does so, he shapes the genealogies to emphasize 2 key lineages. First is the line of the promised Messianic king. So lots of space is dedicated to tracing the line of Judah that led all the way to King David, to whom the Messianic promise was given. And then from David, the author traces that line up into his own day. The other family line that receives lots of attention here is that of the priesthood, the descendants of Aaron, who of course served in the temple. And so right from the start, you can see the 2 main themes, the author's hope of the Messiah coming to build a new temple, and it's rooted in the ancient genealogy. Now, after that, the author moves into the stories about David, and most of these are going to be familiar to you from the book of Samuel, but again, there's some really important differences. So first of all, the author leaves out all of the negative stories about David, where he's portrayed as weak or immoral. So Saul chasing David around the desert and persecuting him, the story of David's adultery with Bathsheba and then murdering her husband, all of that is gone. And what's left are the stories that portray David as a good guy. And not only that, there's also new additional material that you won't find in the book of Samuel that shows David in a very positive light. So there's a large block of chapters where David makes preparations for the temple. He arranges resources and builders and Levites and choirs. And not only that, the author also portrays David as a Moses-like figure. God gives David plans for building the temple, just as he gave plans to Moses for building the tabernacle. So why all this new material about David? The author's not trying to hide David's flaws. He knows that anybody can go read about them in the book of Samuel. Rather, he's trying to portray David as the ideal king in order to make him an image or a type of the future Messiah from the line of David. It's very similar to how Jeremiah or Ezekiel spoke of the coming Messiah as a new David. This is most clear in how the author retells the story of God's covenant promise to David in First Chronicles 17. When you compare the story with its parallel in 2 Samuel 7, you'll see that the author of Chronicles is highlighting that neither David nor Solomon nor any of the kings from his line were the Messianic, and that when the Messiah does come, he will be a king like David. And so for this author, these stories about David from the past are what sustain his hope for the future. After David dies, we move into Second Chronicles, which focuses on the kings that lived in Jerusalem. And again, there's lots of overlap with First and Second Kings, but there are many key differences. So the author has left out all of the stories about the kings of northern Israel, so he can just focus on the line of David. And there's lots of new material about these kings from David's line. He highlights the kings that were obedient to God, and he adds new stories about how their obedience led to success and God's blessing. But he also adds new stories about kings who were unfaithful to God. They didn't follow the Torah, they led Israel to worship idols, and these kings faced horrible consequences, all leading up to Israel's exile, a mess of their own making. And so this whole section becomes a series of character studies where the author wants later generations of Israelites to learn from their family history, and so become faithful to their God and the Torah. Now, the book's conclusion is really unique too. At the very end of the book, the king of the Persians is named Cyrus, and he tells the Israelites that they can go back home, return from exile, rebuild the city and the temple. And he says, last line of the book, whoever there is among you, of all his people, may the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. And that's how the book ends, with an incomplete sentence. Now, of course, the author knows about the first return from exile and the stories of Ezra and Nehemiah. But clearly, in his view, the prophetic hopes of Israel were not fulfilled in those events. And so this incomplete ending shows that the author's hope is set on yet another return from exile, when the Messiah will finally come to rebuild the temple and restore God's people. And so the book of Chronicles, the final book of the Jewish scriptures, it ends by pointing forward. It calls God's people to look back in order to look ahead, because the past has become the source of hope for the future. So Chronicles concludes the Old Testament as a story in search of an ending. And that's what this book is all about.
Kind of, sure.
Is another phrase for Chronicles, each of the days of our lives?
Yes. That's the one term. Like I said, the history of the kings of Israel, or Israel's history at all, is just it reads like a soap opera. From here, we're going to go to First Chronicles 12. The after the kings. And I'll read starting in verse 8. And the reason we're popping here, remember those 400 people that started showing up? This is the list of some of them. As he gets his own armed force here. From the Gadites, there went over to David, the stronghold of the wilderness, mighty experienced warriors, expert with shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions, who were as swift as gazelles on the mountains. Ezer, the chief. Obadiah, second. That's not the prophet. Eliab, third. Mishmana, fourth. Jeremiah, fifth. Not prophet. Attai, sixth. Eliel, seventh. Johanan, eighth. Elzabad, ninth. Jeremiah, 10th. Again, different. Macbanai, 11th. These Gadites were officers of the army, least equal to 100 and the greatest to 1,000. That's what he was saying that they were equivalent to in battle. So the least of these people could fight 100 people and win. The greatest of them could fight 1,000. Take it for what it is. These are the men who crossed the Jordan in the first month when it's overflowing all its banks and put to flight all those in the battles to the east and to the west. So these are from the tribe of Gad. If you remember back in Joshua, as they're moving, Moses is dead, Joshua's leading them into the promised land. The tribe of Gad was the first of them. They're like the Marines of this. That's what that's in reference to. Ezer means aid, and so every time you see Ezer, I'm sure you also have in Ezer churches. So Ezer means aid. Obadiah means worshiper of Yahweh, which that's that tetragrammaton, or Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh. Mishmana means staff. Joy. Jeremiah means God is. Attai means my hour. Eliel, now this was great. God is God. What a name. Elzabad means God is bountiful. Machbanai means poverty. And of course, I mentioned the Gad verse. That's found in Joshua 4. Reading further, verse 16. Some Benjaminites and Judahites came to the stronghold of David. David went out to meet them and said to them, if you have come to me in friendship to help me, then my heart will be knit to you. But if you have come to betray me to my adversaries, though my hands have done no wrong, then may the God of our ancestors see and give judgment. Now, David here took everyone's arrival as being one of support. How encouraging that must have been as more and more people showed up, as more and more people come to his side, even though he wasn't out to create a new Israel, he was just trying to protect them along from that. Then the Spirit came upon Amasai, chief of the 30. He said, we are yours, O David. By the way, that 30, David had what he called a group of mighty men. Well, the 30 is what it was referred to originally. So these 30 are kind of his advisors and military experts, and mainly his cabinet, if you will. We are yours, O David, and with you, O son of Jesse. Peace to you, and peace to the one who helped you. For your God is the one who helps you. Then David received them and made them officers in the street. Now here it says in verse 15, when the Spirit came upon Absalom. That phrase came upon, that verb there, literally means flowed. The Spirit flowed in Absalom. Well, that's kind of a nice thing. Absalom, by the way, was strong. So in what a way, his name fit his position. There's one else. No. Okay. David went from, back to First Samuel 22. Yeah, my video is starting to add subtext. It's adding my words to the Bible. I told you this program got smarter while I was looking for everything.
My daughter gave me a little swallow of caffeine to repeat every word I say.
When I was in seminary, early on, I used what's called Dragon software, which is voice activated software. So I didn't have to type so much. You have to tell it where to put periods, colons, and semicolons, and all that. New sentence, new paragraph. David went from there to Mizpah of Moab. He said to the king of Moab, please let my father and mother come to you until I know what God will do for me. He left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him all the time that David was in the stronghold. Then the prophet Gad said to David, do not remain in the stronghold, but leave and go into the land of Judah. So David left and went into the forest of Paran. Now, it seems a little strange that David would send Jesse and his mother to Moab, another enemy of Israel, at least a lot of times in the history. But we have to remember here that David's great grandmother is Ruth. She was a Moabite. And so there is a familial connection.
Is this Boaz, this room?
Yes.
Well, there you
Mm-hmm. And so this idea in ancient Near East, the rule of hospitality was second to only God is God. Okay. So hospitality was a very important rule in the ancient Near East. And so Moab because he was seeking a familial protection. Moab really couldn't resist without breaking the rule of God. So Gad means luck. You know what? First in, you hope they have a little luck. Pereth means to cut. Don't know what that means now, but maybe it'll bring something. Saul heard that David and those who were with him had been located. Now we're back to Saul now. Okay? Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand. I mean, yeah, who's afraid of that? And all his servants were standing around him. Saul said to his servants who stood around him, "Hear now, you Benjaminites, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands, commanders of hundreds? Is that why all of you have conspired against me? No one discloses to me when my son makes a league with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as he is doing today." Doug, the Edomite, who was in charge of Saul's servants, remember him? Okay, answered, "I saw the son of Jesse coming to Nob, to Ahimelech, son of the Ahitub." Now, tamarisk tree is used for memorial grave. They're kind of carved as memorial. And so there he is, Saul is sitting under him. And Doug there, remember, he's the chief shepherd, and he is Saul's informant. He inquired, this is Doug continuing on, he inquired of the Lord for him, gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath, Philistine. Now, this info can't be good for David. Anytime Saul has a spear, he throws it. So, keep that in mind. Verse 11, the king sent to the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and for all his father's house, the priests who were at Nob, and all of them came to the king. Saul said, "Listen now, son of Ahitub." He answered, "Here I am, my lord." Saul said to him, "Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, by giving him bread and a sword, and by inquiring of God for him, so that he has risen against me to lie in wait, as he is doing today?" Saul here is portraying himself as the victim, as he has done several times in the past. Verse 14, then Ahimelech answered the king, "Who among all your servants is so faithful as David? He is the king's son-in-law, and is quick to do your bidding, and is honored in your house. Is today the first time that I have inquired of God for him? By no means. Do not let the king impute anything to his servant or to any member of my father's house, for your servant has known nothing of all this, much or little." Remember David when he righteously lied. Ahimelech doesn't know what's going on. Truthfully, he doesn't know at all what's going on. Verse 16, the king said, "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, in all your father's house." The king said to the guard who stood around him, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David." They knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not raise their hand to attack the priests of the Lord. Saul won't kill when he's told to, but he'll certainly waste no time in killing needs. Most of his servants here, you can see, feared God more than they feared Saul. So, it's bad to kill a priest. For anybody who happens to be outside listening, it's bad to kill a priest. So, just a little self-protection. Verse 18, then the king said to Doug, "You, Doug, turn and attack the priest." Doug the Edomite turned and attacked the priest, and didn't wait at all. Turn and attack the priest.
Well, but he's an Edomite, he's not a follower of God, right?
Well, possibly, it doesn't say that he is, but it doesn't say that he's not. It mentions him as Edomite as in order to keep us referencing that Edom came from the line of Esau, the one who lost his birthright. So, okay. So Doug the Edomite turned and attacked the priest. On that day, he killed 85 who wore the linen ephod. Now the city of the priests he put to the sword, men and women, children and infants, oxen, donkeys, and sheep put to the sword. But one of the sons of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and went after David. Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. David said to Abiathar, "I knew on that day when Doug the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, I am responsible for the lives of all your father's house." stay with me and do not be afraid, for the one who seeks my life seeks your life. You will be saved. So Abiathar here means great father. And here we see that David is taking responsibility for the death of the priest there at Nob, and all of the whole family line of priests there, 85 people died.
Why you kill an oxen and donkey and sheep?
Well, you know, when you, I guess he's trying to gain favor with Saul by, you know, you told me to kill the priests, I'll kill everything. Look now at 49.
He looked wild.
Okay, so we're done for today, but for homework next week, I want y'all to read Psalm 52. Did we read that? I didn't think so. Read 52, and next week we'll learn how David saves the day, runs away, and refuses to slay. Any questions?
You're a poet, don't know
I'm a poet and didn't know.
52. Did you come on that one?
Mhm, that's all 52.
it. That's what
I'm gonna get people.
So are there any questions? Really? Okay, turn the light on. I'm sorry, Mark. You've been sitting over there in the dark.
That's okay.
Ask about the Jewish Bible.
Okay.
It is in Chronicles, but it includes books in our Bible that come after Chronicles.
Pretty much the Tanakh, which is what the Jewish Bible is called, encompasses every book that we have in our Old Testament.
Okay.
When our canon was being formed, when our Bible was being put together, it rearranged the books of the books of the Old Testament in a way that seemed more sensible. But in their case, as that group mentioned, it's called the Bible Project, by the way. Y'all can go online. It's a wonderful project. But they've done things for every book of the Bible, as long and for many of the specific people that are involved. If we get a video for every person, we can follow up with that. Yeah, it's just, as you mentioned,
It is.
yeah, it was a part, the Samuels, the Kings, and the Chronicles were originally in the Jewish Bible. They're just a single, First and Second Samuel are a single book. First and Second Kings are a single book. First and Second Chronicles are a
The
single.
editing just broken up.
Right. We have broken them up into chapters and given them names.
So just like we numbered the verses.
Right. Yeah, there were no chapters or verses. It was just a straight reading. And so when you think about when they're reading this in the Jewish temple, that, you know, they're not going with, well, some of the Psalms were first because they were Psalms. Yeah, they're reading the Psalm as one text. So, you know, when you think about that, that's why it's important to not read things out of context. You know, if you're gonna read one verse, at least read the one before it, the one after it, at least to get an idea. If that don't help, read more. But I would say, even read the chapter before and the chapter after in order to get a better feel of what. Any other questions? No? Okay, well, God bless everyone. See you on the trail.
Thank you.